Well, welcome again to Lieutenant Governor Digital Town Hall. I'm David Zuckerman, and I'm joined by a great group of youth activists and also just straight up youth. I think, you don't have to be defined as an activist. You're people standing up for what you believe in, and sometimes we have names and terms that start to pigeonhole people. And so anyway, this great group, Oriel, Max, Carson, Maple, and Hope, who are from Harwood, Montpelier, and U32 high schools in this general area in and near Montpelier. And we're going to be talking about youth lobby. A lot of it is around environmental issues and climate change. And just going to have a free-flowing conversation about what some of folks would like to see happen as we're facing all of our future together with what a lot of us have done from the past, some of us for more years than others, to create the situation we're in. And we're going to chat for a bit, and we're going to have a two-parts episode today because we have so many great folks and so many important things to talk about. So we'll just get right into it, and maybe one of you or multiples can talk about what is Youth Lobby. Do any of you know exactly originally how it was formed, or were some of you the originators? What's the decision-making process like across different schools? How do you do that? So, what is Youth Lobby and how does it work?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So I'm a senior at Harwood, and I've been a part of the Vermont Youth Lobby for 3 years now. I wasn't there the original year it was started. I started in 2015. I was just a freshman. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know Matt Henchen, who's a teacher at Harwood, and helped there was a group of students that were in like a study hall or something, and they were just talking about like the political atmosphere right now and like how the youth aren't being represented, and they're really frustrated about it. So they sat down and they were like, what can we do? And then they decided, well, let's plan a rally. And their key issue was climate change, and our politicians aren't doing anything about it. So they were like, let's plan a rally, get a bunch of students there, fight for what we believe in. And so I went to that first rally when I was a freshman, and I was super empowered. And the next year I came back to school and was like, yeah, I want to be a part of this. This is such a cool thing. And from there we've grown. We've had 1 year over 1,500 kids show up to the State House.
Right, so the big rally day is on the State House lawn, right?
Yeah, it's usually in the spring, like April or May. And this year we are planning it for May, early May. And this year we really went into it and we're like, we don't want to just do a rally, we really want to have a presence in the State House. And so we've planned our own press conference, and we've spoken.
We had a little technical difficulty, so we're back, and we're going to hear a little bit from Max about some of his, hey, what happened? How did I get involved? So what's up, Max?
Well, I had a little different story than Ori. I actually originally got involved with Youth Lobby through music, and I was a part of a band that got to play at a sort of climate retreat as well as the rally itself. And this is kind of my first year really getting to work with the steering committee of the Youth Lobby and getting to help network and get other kids involved. And I guess from my perspective, I was really an example of someone who got to witness all the cool things that the Youth Lobby was doing by attending that climate retreat 2 years ago. And I was really just captivated by the work and the passion that these people, these kids, these friends of mine had. And that's really what got me to be a part of this. And I think that every year this rally is a great time because either kids who do care about these environmental issues, or kids who just want to have a good time and maybe learn a few things, they show up. And then every year more and more kids are wanting to be a part of this movement.
And I also want to share their sort of why do you care and how did you find out about this?
So I'm Hope, and I had some experience with a lot of legislative activism, and I've worked with Molly Burke, Representative Molly Burke, as a legislative intern in the past, and I think one of my goals is always just trying to get other students and my peers involved in activism, and whenever it happens, even in small ways, I just get so excited. But I think that as Youth Lobby in the recent years has worked to expand our message and our work, not to just planning the rally or to engaging students, but to also getting students in the State House and supporting policies and specific pieces of legislation. And as we've broadened our focus not to just climate justice, but also social justice and racial justice as well, I think it's just a really great opportunity for me to integrate some of the work that I've already been doing and to collaborate with others, and I think it's just a really great vehicle for getting youth more involved in the political process. So.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by not just the events that happen, but the work that goes into them, and learning what you're learning as far as, wow, planning a big event, what do you have to think about? From energy for the band, and I don't know whether there's any offsets or you all use solar energy for the microphones, maybe you don't, but maybe it's something to think about in the future. Reserving space and going through the governmental process of permitting and getting permission, coordinating with lots of folks coming in, what's going to happen with traffic. Like, all of those organizational skills, I just think are amazing for you to be learning at this age. You were saying as kids, maybe as young adults, somewhere in that mix, because as you become more engaged now, I hope that engagement will continue for the rest of your lives. And I can tell you as a political person, often young people are not as engaged, and there's always this effort to pull you into the process, because once you're in, you stay engaged, and it's about agency in the system. And so, and do you know what I mean by agency in the system? Like having a voice in the system and knowing that the system is there to hear you if you use your voice. But if you don't use your voice, the system is not going to hear you, and it's going to listen to other people and other powers. So, are you feeling like this is an experience, both organizing it, but then also beyond organizing it, doing it, that's going to be helpful for you going forward? Or is that just me being like, hey, I see this happening to you, but it's really not going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, the past couple of years, helping plan this rally, it's a huge task, and there's so much that goes into it, like you were saying, permits and our parade route and who's gonna speak, who's gonna perform, getting porta potties, getting Ben and Jerry's to show up. There's just so much that goes into it, and we have since the beginning we've kind of been Harwood started Youth Lobby, but we want so many schools, we have U32 and Montpelier as our allies, and so I think in the past we really wanted to draw people in, and we have monthly meetings. We usually meet at Montpelier High School, and we try to reach out to people who have attended the rally and invite them. And so this year I think it's been really good. We've had a core group of students from Harwood U32, Montpelier, and now we have some people from Stowe really involved, and it's been helpful to pass along the work, so not just one school's doing it, and I think we have a really committed group this year, and it's awesome.
And I'm curious, you mentioned speakers and who's going to speak and who isn't. I'm curious, in the world of politics that I'm involved in, and sometimes we organize rallies and events, there's a lot of questions of who's going to speak, what perspective is going to be represented. Has that been an interesting process for you all, as opposed to sort of everybody who wants to speak gets to speak, or no politicians, because we want to hear from young people? What about, is it more young people from one school or another, or more men than women, or more women than men, or different communities that have had different other oppressions? So has that been part of your conversation, and what's that been like as an exploration for you of, oh, these things are hard even at this level, or has it been pretty easy? Is that all just not existent in this conversation, or is this something that does happen?
I think that it is there. I remember in our last youth lobby meeting, we were talking about if we wanted to just have youth voice be speaking.
Right.
Because it's been different the past years, who speaks at the rally and what kind of message that sends. So I think I don't know if we agreed upon this, but I remember I was on behalf of just having a youth voice there, because I think that's more empowering to have just people who, because also to go along with your original question, like I realized doing this work that it's like you have to know so much, like so whenever I see youth that are like making the choice to like come speak about these issues and they've done their research, it's like really impressive to me, because I realize that it's like it's not easy to really like have a grasp on everything that's going on. And I think that like I haven't been too much like on working on planning the rally, but just knowing like the issues that are going on in the State House is like it's a big task to really like be keeping up with it. And when you're a student and you have homework and you have things that you're doing, it is like it's hard. And so when I see other students that are like also doing that, it's just like it is inspiring, because it's like a full-time job to like have to like know all this stuff. So obviously we can't like put everything we have into learning about this.
Just for fun, wait till you have a full-time job and you're trying to, you know, to organize whatever. But so I saw a little while ago just an amazing young woman from, I think it was Finland or Sweden, Greta Thunberg, speak to a global, you know, conference on climate change, and she just laid it out. You know, she was like, you know what, you all have failed us. You all, people like me and people in higher positions of power have completely failed us. When are you gonna actually take care of this burning fire? We are in an emergency. Why are you not taking sort of emergency actions, passing policies that are quite aggressive to do something about this? Have you seen that? And what did you take away from that? And what do you want to see people like those of us in power here in Montpelier do? You know, that was about global scale and nations, but on a state level. So what did you feel when you saw her speak, and what do you want to see us do? You know, her call to action.
I feel like, especially not just like her, but like also like department students.
Right.
Like when we saw like this massive group of like youth activists like rise up for like something they care about, at least for me, and like I can't speak for everyone, but it was really like inspiring, and it gave me like hope that like we can like overcome these issues. Because when you're educated about like what's going on, it's very easy to get like down on things and just like give up, especially as a kid, because you feel like helpless, like no one above you is gonna like help you or whatever. So like seeing like strong youth with like strong, powerful voices like actually making like change is really like empowering and inspiring.
And is some of that strength, I see some of that strength being in that passion, being in that experience. It isn't always about knowing every fact, because guess what? Political people are still learning facts all the time. As adults, we're learning information every day, but it's also having that passion, or seeing that from so many now. Of course, the ones in Parkland sort of wasn't a choice, right? That was like foisted upon them. Many of them said, this was not my plan, you know, but this horrific event happened. But it's amazing when faced with adversity what people can do and rise up. So I just want to empower you a little bit that it's as much about your passion and your beliefs that then can be backed up with facts. But you don't have to have every fact at your disposal before you can be a voice for something. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I
And
completely agree.
and what would you like to see? I mean, regardless of it being an exact fact and an exact policy, but broad sweeping, what do you want to see from Montpelier, from this State House that we're sitting in?
Well, so this year is definitely a big year for us and having a bigger presence in the State House, and we've been able to sign on to a climate action plan, and we've been able to witness speakers like Greta Thunberg, and our biggest thing is there is a bit of struggle of knowing everything. Like you said, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing for us is we actually had the privilege of talking with Peter Sterling, and who I've been friends with since I was an infant, but he was able to talk to us and give us just a general idea of what the inner workings are here at the State House. And one thing that really caught my attention, and we were able to
Just for
brief
clarity
about-
for a second, just because folks out there may
Yeah.
not know who Peter Sterling is. Peter is the chief staff person for the President Pro Tem, who is the elected leader of the Senate. So that's Senator Tim Ash. And Peter has been very involved both as an organizer in Vermont around a lot of different issues, and also working here in Montpelier. So just to give people context of who that is, but go ahead, sorry.
And so that helped us really understand what we were getting into when we come to the State House and we speak and we listen. And the biggest thing is, we don't want this to be a scenario where politicians do act on climate change in a small way and then are able to put it back on the back burner.
Claim victory. And
And say, we'll touch back on this in a few years. And so our biggest thing is we want not only bold but comprehensive legislation, because there are many things that all come in hand, because we can't push fully for electrification if we're not getting 100% renewable energy. And so there's all these different things that connect, and we're fed up with getting little things done and then claiming victory and saying, oh, you got what you want, we hear you, we're doing it. But we want more than that, because if it's just little things that are happening, we're never gonna achieve, that goal of climate mitigation. It's never gonna happen. And so that's our stance, is we're trying to push really hard for comprehensive legislation.
And I feel like you bring up like a really good point there, especially with the meeting with Peter Sterling. Like, I think, at least for me, what helped us take more action in the State House was when he was like, you can rally on our front lawn all you want, but we're not going to hear you. Unless you come into the building and have conversations with legislatures, your voice isn't really going to be heard. So I felt like that just become because we need all this big important change, and in order to get there, we need to share our opinions with those legislatures.
I would almost say having the rally and leaving is like saying we did something and going home, right? It actually does take a little more work, a little more persistence. One thing when I talk to groups, whether it's high schoolers like yourselves or even younger as well, is that you can have a voice in the system, both in your physical presence, showing up and talking to legislators, but also in email form. They don't know how old you are or aren't. And so if you present questions like, what are you doing about climate change in an email? Or do you think climate change is real and what do you think about it? Then you get them to reveal their thoughts to you a little bit more before you tell them what to do, because you may need to help them with more information before they're even ready to be doing something for you. The other part is, I've been saying a lot around this building that these 2 years are some of our best 2 years to move bold legislation. And the reason for that is that a lot more people voted in 2018, and this group of people that's here now got elected. In 2020, I think a lot more are going to vote, right? It's a presidential year. Our current president, who's a climate change denier, is going to be on the ballot. And so if we have increased turnout, odds are the folks that got elected in 2018 are pretty likely to get re-elected, even if they do bold things that normally in the past might have turned people off. And I guess my question to you is, as young people who are getting towards the process of engaging and being able to vote, some of you may be able to vote or maybe none, but by 2020, is anybody going to be old enough to vote?
I'm already old enough.
You're old
I
enough,
will be.
right? So 4 out of 5, we'll get there. But my question is, if political folks don't act boldly, how many more cycles will you participate in? Because I've seen, as young people are voting more, and we're getting legislators in who are more on the side of the political spectrum that are maybe going to do something about climate change, but then they're coached by experienced people and folks who've been around a long time. Oh, step by step, we don't want to spook anybody out. Our young people can get turned back off going, we came out finally, we voted for you, and now you're not really doing it. And so why keep voting, right? The sort of chicken and egg. Is that a fair assessment, or do you think young people now are engaged and you're going to keep voting no matter what the results are?
I mean, personally, I can't say for all the youth, because
You can't speak for everybody?
youth is it's a broad spectrum,
That's right.
There's not a lot, all of the youth that are really interested in this type of stuff, which is unfortunate, but
Those that are, what do you sense?
for me, I feel like when I will be able to vote, and if things aren't done the way that I am am hoping for, I feel like I can't turn my back on it now because it's like I'm already like I know too much, you know. Like, it's like I'm already part of this in a way that I feel personally responsible for the outcome of the world in a way that like it's gonna be hard for me to just stop, like just be so frustrated with like legislatures that I like don't vote, you know. That's just something that I cannot really see myself doing to be at a point where I have like no hope left, because it just like I really can't imagine myself giving up on something that like, especially starting young, I've just been so like interested in this. I can't imagine like setbacks putting me as like not.
That's
Same.
hopeful for me, because I've been worried that now that we've finally seen this big engagement, that if the political process doesn't produce a result as a thank you for that engagement, that would fade away. So it sounds like you might not. But what do you want? I mean, have you seen some of the comments from leaders in the State House about some of these climate change issues? Even just the last couple of days, some bills were introduced, and it was sort of too little, too late. We're not going to have time to do this. What was your reaction to some of those comments?
I don't think it's true. I feel like we can't just keep putting it off. We can't just keep delaying these issues. We need to enact bills. And we, some of us, like Carson and I, like a month ago, sat down and listened to the JFO study release. And it said we need a carbon tax or some sort of fee in order to reach our renewable goals by 2035. And we need that carbon pricing, but we also need other infrastructure. And I think these two bills that were implemented, we need to pass them.
Or introduced,
or introduced. We need to pass them, and we can't just keep delaying it and saying, oh, like we can't debate it. Like we still have 2 weeks or more, and like we need that. Like we can do it in this time. And it's just kind of frustrating to hear, oh, like it's too late. It's not too late.
And I think that impassivity is what has gotten us to this point as a nation in terms of how we responded to climate change, or how corporations have spent thousands of dollars trying to deny it. And I think that maintaining that attitude is only going to push us further in the direction that we don't want to be going in. And so I think that we're all trying to be cognizant of the concept of whether bills can pass, but I think it's also important to really acknowledge, and I think the Green New Deal does a great job at this, of acknowledging what's also necessary at this point. And so what's necessary is transforming our economy in a way that is equitable, and incorporating youth voice in our political decision making, and incorporating the voices of those who are marginalized. And so I think that also when you speak of like maybe youth are going to sort of step away from the political process because they're so disappointed in what they've seen, I think also in analyzing like historical trends in youth activism that we've seen from the civil rights movement, I don't think we're ever going to be really going away. And so I think that I don't
want you to go away, but I was worried.
No, we'll be here. And
I mean, that doesn't mean there's not going to be consequences for no action.
I agree. I mean, like I said, I'm extremely frustrated that, I mean, I have a 13-year-old daughter, right? So a few years younger than you. And when the election happened a couple of years ago and I was first elected as lieutenant governor, I should have been joyous that night. We also, that same night was the night that this president was elected. And that was a bit bigger down than my getting elected was up. And there were 2 things, the Supreme Court and climate change, that just could not get out of my head and thinking about my daughter. And so you should hold us accountable. And us is a big group, and there's different players within that. So you have to also start to discern who's holding things up versus who isn't, and how to support those that are trying to push forward, whether it's carbon pricing, whether it's weatherization, whether it's sourcing renewable energy or encouraging more renewable energy production, distributed versus big scale. There's a lot of complexity to these issues. So sometimes when the topic is brought up and they say, well, there's not enough time, right? There's only a month left or 2 months to do something. There is some very real complexity. On the other hand, if a solution is not, or major legislation isn't passed this year, it's a 2-year biennium. So some homework can be done, quote, setting the table for January. So what are the bold ideas? What is the work being done in committees to make that happen? So there's ways to help push the agenda forward, even if in the moment we don't win, but we've got this 2-year window of this policy-making body. And I just sort of want to help give you some of that information because it is complex. You know, it's just like our daily lives. Like I'm curious, what individual things, not just politically trying to change the system are you doing, but what individual changes have any of you made in your lives thinking about what your actions mean individually? Have you done some things differently than you would have done 3 or 4 years ago?
I feel like I can speak on this like relatively well because I'm an assistant teacher for a class at Harwood, and so I have a really like direct role in like educating younger students about these issues because it's a civics class like based around like political engagement and stuff like that. So I feel like this year especially I've been able to like really like almost like unveil like the light to these kids and like show them that like they're not living in the world they think they live in. Not everything isn't perfect. There's a lot of wrong going on and there's a lot we need to do about it. And I think like coming out of youth lobby as an organization where youth voice is of the utmost importance, I have to do everything I can to create new youth voices like coming through the pipeline.
Cool. So we're gonna take a brief break, but when we come back, I want to ask some more about, and you can think about, individual things you've done or you're doing that are maybe different than you would have done, or ways you vision your life that may be different than it was before you started really being as aware or acknowledging and knowing about some of these climatic issues that we're facing. Because it's both big policy and it's individual decisions we make in our lives, right? So we'll be back in a couple minutes. Welcome back for our second half of this episode of our town meeting. We've got this great group of 5 folks from Harwood Union U32 and Montpelier High School, and so we're extending this town meeting into a couple sections. Climate change is one of the biggest issues of our time. You all have such great thoughts and bits to add and maybe challenges for us in the elected sphere, so we're doing 2 episode pieces together here, and you were just talking about maybe what some individual things you individually, specifically either in your home or as an individual choices you're making that you feel are adjustments from maybe what you would have made if you didn't think about climate change and you weren't thinking about your and everybody else's future. Anybody want to offer any other bits or pieces on that? Okay.
I individually am working on a project at school right now where I'm taking, I have a class dedicated, or a band, like a period dedicated to this, where I am working to later this spring do a presentation to my school where I will be presenting a film by 350 that Bill McKibben essentially created called Do the Math, and I'll be pausing and paraphrasing and then introducing my own ideas and bringing new info from the reports that have been coming out, and hopefully just educating my peers at U32 about what's going on and why it matters. And that's something that I definitely wouldn't have thought to do or felt the need to do a couple of years ago. But my main motivation for doing that is I think a lot of the world, but especially within this nation, is way too comfortable not doing anything because there's not enough going on to make people feel that responsibility, even though this is a global issue that everyone should be responsible for as, you know, a human on this planet. But my main hope is that I can present this to my school, and even if it just means for some individuals them thinking, oh, you know what, this is an important issue and I am a part of it and I can do something about it, and then maybe they go home and they introduce different environmental ideas to their family, maybe they speak up, they come join youth lobby, they join the green team at our school, all these different things. But I personally come from a family where, since a young age, we compost. My dad talks to our family a lot about environmental issues and has always tried to urge us towards, being aware about these issues. But I know for a lot of people, whether they're aware of it or not, they're not even necessarily able to do these sorts of things. Maybe if you don't have the finances to replace that oil heater or get a new, more efficient car, then that's very difficult. And so that's a big part of our
And folks maybe shouldn't be shamed for that. There's
Yeah,
a lot of
totally.
shaming in our society.
Yes.
Of, well, why aren't you doing better?
Yeah.
Well, maybe people can't, and it's very hard to say, we can't, we don't have the money. That's a big issue, right?
Yeah, and then that's why Vermont needs to set in place programs that will help these low-income Vermonters get that electric vehicle, like weatherize their house better. Like that needs to happen in order for us to, because like as a upper middle class family, like my family has the ability to buy an electric car or heat our house
And then get the
better,
tax credit
or,
for it.
yeah, exactly, or get solar panels. But so many families in Vermont don't have that ability. They don't have that extra cash to spend on it, and so it's helping those families.
And it's
take the
complex,
step.
because that means coming up with money at the state
Yeah,
level,
totally.
which means what sacrifices is your family or families that are better off willing to make in the form of taxes and contributions to make that possible. And these things do get woven together, and sometimes it's, well, you should just do this, but there's impact. So the decisions and how some folks live more comfortably have to be thought about. Are you willing to live a little less comfortably in order that some of these changes can be made? And I don't know what your response to that is. Does it mean there isn't necessarily a one-for-one, someone has to give up something in order for us to save the planet, but there are going to be sacrifices people need to make and decisions people need to make about how much do we travel, how warm is our house, do we buy that extra trinket that we want, or do we really need it? So that's where some of my question comes from is, what individual, along with getting folks more involved in the political system, which we should, and I'd like to hear from you a little bit of what do you want to see from me? What do you want to see from elected people? Or what questions do you have for me? But also, what individual decisions can be made that you see going forward in your own lives that you might be interested in making? Or maybe you've made them, maybe you haven't. There's no shame in what you have and haven't done, but I'm curious.
I think something that I try to do, I don't know if I necessarily succeed, is thinking about packaging when I buy things and thinking about using reusable containers, and also thinking about the clothes that I buy from. I personally am super ignorant about what companies I'm buying clothes from, which is something that I am aware that a lot of big corporations are not exactly environmentally friendly. So I think that's something that I'm trying to do is be more aware of who I'm buying from and who I'm giving my money to, and also with buying things online. A lot of times I feel like not just clothes but just anything, there's just a lot of excessive plastic that comes with that sometimes I will get it and I open the box and I'm just disgusted that I have to throw that all away. But it's and so I do it and I'm just oh, it's fine, and I just throw it away, and that's put a Band-Aid on that, I don't have to see it anymore.
Well, none of us are perfect, right?
Yeah.
So this is a journey for all of us to be figuring out, and the possibility of buying more local. But then you have to drive sometimes to do that. So is it better to order something online? Well, that also gets driven to your door. So none of these are simple, right? And I think sometimes we can beat up on ourselves. And you started to oh, and then I did this, and then I did that.
It's just so
and,
sad to think about all
right?
that trash.
But it's an evolution that we're all going through, and none of us by a long shot are perfect. It's a journey, and we're exploring the possibilities and making small adjustments. I remember at first it was really hard to contemplate never using a paper or a plastic cup, and in fact, I do occasionally use them. So the term never is very extreme. But now it's second nature to me to generally bring a mug around or a container. That didn't happen overnight. It's a conscious decision, and I have many more decisions that still need to be made. I am a long way from perfect. So what thoughts do you have? I mean, I've been asking you all questions about what do you do, or what do you want to see happen, or what it's like to organize, and how does it all work? Do you have any questions for the political process, or through me, the political situation that you want to ask me at all?
I'm curious about the Vermont Equity and Infrastructure Act and what your thoughts are on it. And I know it just recently got introduced, so I'm wondering, like, what your thoughts are on it. And I know that it speaks to a lot of the principles that Youth Lobby's been advocating for in terms of weatherization and in supporting those people who often are lower income or more rural and don't have the money or the means to make the most energy efficient choices for themselves. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and some of the other pieces of legislation.
So a couple things. One is there's about 1,000 different bills that have been introduced, and I don't know them all. So I appreciate you giving me a little more context of what the bill does, because I didn't hear about the exact title of the bill and know that. Sometimes you'll go, what do you think of H427? And you go, oh, I don't know what H427 is. And so thank you for the context. I appreciate that. So I think I put out a tweet a bit ago when Representative Ocasio-Cortez started talking about a Green New Deal and the Sunrise Movement and some of that conversation. And I said, what do people think of a Green Mountain New Deal? You know, sort of to make it a Vermonty name and relate to what can we do here. And much of that topic is around not just solving environmental challenges, but economic injustice challenges and accessibility challenges. And even there's history to be learned from the New Deal had a number of racist bits embedded in it even back when that was done. And so we are constantly learning from our past and trying to right injustices of the past while not creating more injustices as we do it. So to me, really looking at a comprehensive look at energy, climate, and economic justice and injustice is a critical piece of how we look at all these things. We end up in the system here having separate committees. You know, there's the Environmental and Natural Resources Committee, and then there's the Human Services Committee, and then there's the taxing committees, and then there's this and that. And they don't always kind of blend those issues together the way that they could. And so I would tend to want something that is much more progressive from a taxation perspective. So we have the resources to make sure when we say to people, we need to move in this direction on carbon, that folks who are either rural or lower income are hit harder by something like a carbon tax, and a carbon pollution tax. And in fact, the other day I saw some information that the tax on carbon will have a fairly small change on people's habits and what they do, because you still have to drive to work. It's just now going to pay more. It's not gonna, few people are going to, some will make changes in what cars they own. And so there will be an environmental plus, but it's going to be a fairly small one relative to the dollars. But then with those dollars, if they are invested in public transportation, weatherization, broadband even, so fewer people have to commute to work, and various other investments in renewable energy and supporting small-scale solar that is hard to afford if you're struggling every day to just pay your bills, then the environmental return on carbon is much, much greater in how those dollars are spent than how those dollars are raised. And so that leads me to think, okay, maybe the method of raising the money might not be a carbon pollution tax. Maybe it's just a progressive income tax. And I don't yet have, but I'm looking for a combination of the chart of carbon dioxide emissions, which really started to explode in the 40s and 30s, 40s and 50s, and now we're just way, way up in terms of the amount of carbon we're emitting, and the disparity in income, where the wealthiest folks' incomes are doing this, and more than half the population's income since 1980 has actually been below the rate of GDP. So yeah, people are really struggling because the money that's being produced in our society by the hard work of everyday people, they're not getting into their pocketbooks. So does the carbon emissions and the income distribution have similar widening gaps? And therefore, should we say, well, if you're getting all this money from this carbon polluting system, shouldn't you be the ones contributing to a system to reduce the carbon polluting system? So is there a way to create a more progressive tax than a carbon pollution tax, and then use that money for that bigger reward, which is how we change our infrastructure and our economy and our transportation system to make it not negatively impactful on working class people who are struggling already just to put food on their table. And you want to talk about the shaming when you say, I can't believe you feed your kids that, right? And we talk about health. It's like, well, if that's what you can afford, and you're telling people they're putting the wrong food on the table, think about the impact that has. So I think, maybe I've answered your question, like in concept, in big picture, I very much think these are the kinds of things we have to be talking about and looking at and bringing in all these different issues. But that's big, and it's going to take a lot of youth action and others' action, folks who are watching, calling their legislators and saying, wait a minute, climate change and these economic injustices are some of the biggest issues we're facing. Why am I not hearing more about that? And really getting pressure on everyday members and senators as well as leadership to say, wait a minute, the governor just had this big panel, came out with all these things. What's being done? The governor isn't pushing those things. The legislature isn't pushing a lot of those things. What are we doing about climate change? Because the impacts on our state, from skiing, which is our economy, agriculture, which is our economy, heating our homes, big storms like Hurricane Irene or Tropical Storm Irene, and both life impacts and financial impacts, they're huge. How can we afford not to be doing these things? So I think I tend to look at these things as all pretty related, and I don't know if that was a fair answer to your question, but I hope I addressed a fair amount of it. Other questions, or even questions for each other that can pull out, like, hey, what can we do? What gets you excited to fight on this stuff? You know? Yeah.
Well, I think, very great point. How there definitely there's an aspect in our society which is not good, and we want to get out of our culture to shame those who aren't able to financially, weatherize their home, have renewable energy, and get the new
electric car.
Exactly. And so there are two parts to what we're trying to do. One is spread awareness to get those who are able to be willing, to feel willing to help have their money sourced into places that can then become more environmentally efficient. And so there's the getting people to feel willing and feel like they want to contribute and help us be more environmentally aware, and then also getting the money and getting the just the different programs, because there's not everything costs money.
Right.
If we can establish, and there are already some being proposed of different plans that if we can get at the state level, if we can get politicians to sign on to those, then that forces them to not be able to sit back and not do anything, because then all of a sudden they're accountable and they have to do something, because it doesn't cost money to say you're going to do something, then you just have to do it. So there are these different plans that we hope, these different climate action plans that we hope we can get at the state level politicians to sign on. So those are the two different things, and with those working hand in hand, both people being willing to contribute, and then on the state level, those plans and programs being put in place, those taxes being put in place to then get that money sourced properly. That's where those things happen, because yes, there are members of the audience that the Youth Lobby speaks to that want to change make those small adjustments to limit their carbon footprint, but it's really the big adjustments that are going to limit the carbon footprint. Like you taking a glass bowl to put your salad in to bring to work, like that's great, but there are some bigger things, like having electric vehicles and how we heat our homes, that this all needs to be implemented into our culture, and that the programs and the money need to be there, and that's big.
Well, and I think a key point you just made was that it isn't always it costs $1 to save $1. Many times it's money up front that actually saves a lot more down the line. And so you don't have to sacrifice a lot, but it goes back to the who has the money up front, and how can government maybe help make it so that folks can get over that hurdle, because if you weatherize a home, it can actually pay for itself in reduced annual energy costs. So can we create the financial systems that make it so that working class folks can get the money up front and then pay that back with the savings, and actually above the savings, they would still have a better financial situation. So you sort of do the two birds with one stone thing, which may or may not be an allowable phrase anymore, I don't even know, but where you actually are saving folks money and you're saving the environment and climate from the impacts of CO2. So, you know, other thoughts as we sort of get a little bit close to the end here that you want to put out there? What's a message or a statement that you would love for other folks, young or old or political or not that engaged, to really take home today and go, well, how do you want to inspire them? Tell me your inspiration.
Something that I think like I just want to tell other youth is like, I think there's a lot of like jargon that like, I don't know, I hear a lot, and even from other youth that are into like politics and climate action, sometimes that like it can be like hard to understand, and sometimes you don't really feel like you know enough about the subject. And I've talked to a lot of people at my school who feel like, I'm like, oh, you should come to the youth lobby meeting or like join Earth Group, but they're like, oh, I don't really know that much about it. But I think you know more than you think you do, and you give yourself credit for as a young person. And at the end of the day, like, you don't need to know all the fancy words and the details. Like, if you know what you believe in and you know enough for your future that you want to preserve that, it's like, it's really important that you show up, and you don't have to worry about, you know, like such nitty-gritty things. You just, you know, you have what you believe in, and I think that's really important to just value that.
And we all started out knowing none of this, right? There's a first day, and there's an opportunity to say, you know, I don't know that. Can you explain what that term is? That's okay to do. And in fact, again, people are sometimes afraid to admit what they don't know. And yet, there might be half the rest of the room that has the same question. Everyone's afraid to say it. And by reaching out and saying, yeah, sorry, you just said something I don't understand. Could you just give a little more information about that term or what that means? And everybody benefits. So I think that's a really important point that you've made in terms of, you know, you don't have to know everything. Come to the table and you'll start learning more, and you have more opportunity.
And
that's great.
I think just coming to the table and just like, I don't know, showing up for things does way more impact than you really think it does. It's just so important that you, I don't know, get out there, and even if you're just doing a small thing, I know we talk a lot like about big things, which is, you know, what we're here for, but it's like, as just a young person who's like a student, I think a lot of times people don't really feel like they themselves have a lot of power, not even like because adults have told them, but they don't really like, I don't know, they don't think that them doing a little thing will matter. But
yeah.
I've definitely the past 2 years have like just been like pushed a lot to like do this, do that, like not in a bad way, just encouraged to do these things, and I'm just like, oh yeah, sure. And it's really like been, I think, beneficial for a lot of people, and I wouldn't have like originally thought that, but I just hope that other young people know that it is really, really important, and it helps a lot of people if you're willing to show up and do a lot of times a minimal amount of work, and that can lead to some really amazing things.
There's a great song that's going to be sort of boring and slow, and you're going to have to find it on YouTube, from the 60s and 70s, called Alice's Restaurant. It's long, it's like 40 minutes long, okay? So people have to have a little patience. I know we're in the like immediate results society, but just sit down at your computer one day and watch and listen to that song, because it really talks about it. At the end, the culminating piece of the story, it's by Arlo Guthrie, is if one person does it, they'll think you're crazy. 2 people do it, they'll think you're both crazy. But imagine if 50 people do it. And so sometimes just showing up makes it a bigger crowd, and people go, why are all these people doing something? So, but it takes that first person standing up, and then a second person joining them, and then the 5th and 10th people, and suddenly there's 50. And a couple of years ago, we had 20,000 people out here. And it's an incredible impact as more people show up. It doesn't always have to be 20,000. There's rallies all the time of 30 people and 100 people. And And those voices are important. And you've all had 1,500 people, so now you get them to pick up the phone and do a little more. So again, right to your point, and again, Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie, it's going to sound scratchy and stuff, it's old school, but it's about the Vietnam War and about protesting for change and activating for change. Any other last inspiration from anybody?
I mean, I feel like you really like hit on the dot there, because like, as Youth Lobby, over the years, we've like improved our like numbers and like what we've been doing like every year. Like things only get better. Like we're always standing on the shoulders of each other. And like this year, we're going for like those big things and those big changes. But those are like built on the foundation of all those little things that we've been doing. And we've been like waiting for this long. We just need to take action, yes.
Well, one last thought, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, throw out there that, so I guess as a message to anyone listening, we not only want to kind of, we want the masses to realize what's going on and to rise up and to understand their responsibility, so that we can't, shame people who have a larger carbon footprint when there's, they don't have the finances to, limit that. But we also can't expect that this, the massive fossil fuel industry is going to all of a sudden switch and start doing something about their emissions. So, that everyone has to realize their responsibility as a human on this earth. And if everyone can understand that, then there won't be all this waiting and this people sitting down and not doing anything about it, because it can't be done by one person. Everyone needs to realize and do their part, so that the money can be in the right place, so that the passion can be there and that everyone can care. And then also, there is a lot of stuff that needs to happen, through legislation, and we as a youth lobby want not only bold but comprehensive climate legislation, and those are the two big things that we want to get out there.
Well, thank you. It's inspiring to me. I first got engaged just a few years older than you when I first was active in college, and somehow ended up in this room. I still don't really know how, as lieutenant governor. So first of all, you never know where you're going to end up. Take your path where it takes you, but also thank you for these words to me and to this audience and this town meeting. So I just want to appreciate you all taking time to be here, and stay active and pick up the phone during these next few weeks. And folks out there, if you care about climate change, call your legislator, ask them what they're doing about it. Ask them what the legislature's doing about it. And if you think it's not enough, encourage them to do more. If you think it's great, say thank you and encourage them to do more. Or if you don't agree, call them and tell them you don't agree. That's what democracy is about, is using your voice and participating. So thank you for joining me today. And thanks folks for joining us on this town hall meeting, and join us again. Thank you.